Hi everyone, it's Motivational Monday, Mindful Digitality Webcast. This is your new episode, and I'm your host, Ben Wong from Vancouver. When we look at the available research on the topic of gaming disorder, we see that they broadly fall under four areas. So there are four main areas, four distinct areas in which every piece of academic research is done on the topic of gaming disorder. The first area, this area involves the factors that fuel gaming disorder. So these are risk factors that could precipitate someone before or during their course of development of problem gaming as a condition. The second area has to do with prevalence, or maybe the validation of some of the diagnostic criteria that had been rolled out. So they look at what portion of the population meet those criteria to have that diagnosis, or to fulfill the diagnosis of gaming disorder. They look at whether the criteria set out are valid. Do they apply to all individuals struggling with the problem, or do they only apply to a certain subgroup of that population? So that's the second area. The third area has to do with applicational, it has to do with applicational aspects of video games in accomplishing some other goals. For example, using video games to teach, using video games for educational purposes, using video games or applications or digital applications to accomplish creative tasks, for example. So that's another area of research. And in this area of research, it's also becoming more and more popular under the headline of telemedicine or telehealth. So electronic health, e-health, using the digital platform, using games even, to accomplish health-related goals, medical goals, health-related goals. It could be some sort of an intervention for an illness, could be facilitation of someone struggling with certain mental health or psychological conditions in accomplishing some nominal daily task. So that's the third area. The last and the fourth area is the neurophysiology, or the physical physiology of video gaming. In other words, what happens to the body physiologically, what happens to the brain when a gamer plays games. So these are the four main areas. Now, as you can see, it's hard to demand research to go outside of these four areas, because science, by definition, scientific research with the various ways that researchers conduct their work, it's not exactly easy to tease out single factors and to study them, especially in social contexts. And by and large, gaming disorder is as much a social contextual issue as much as it is a biological or physiological or scientific issue. Which is why many of the pressing questions at hand cannot really be answered by research. I'm just not so sure whether it ever will be. I'll give a prominent example. I get asked this question very, very often. How much is too much? Broad. How much is too much? Sounds like a fairly subjective question too. If 60 hours is too much, 60 hours a week of gaming is too much for one person, it may not be for another. If this other person is able to balance their lives with 60 hours of gaming, as well as being able to accomplish all the other things all the other things related to aspirations in their lives, who are we to argue? So that's a tough question for science to answer. Another question difficult for science to answer is, what is the age cutoff for watching television or using a cell phone or watching YouTube videos? Arbitrary at best, right? And so what had been happening, some of the policies, some of the tips, some of the best practice recommendations to users and to parents perhaps, they've by and large been based on what seems to be relevant of research conclusions from these aforementioned 4 areas of research. I believe that researchers and policymakers, they do their best, they do their genuine best in putting these together, but they still come up short in the sense that science really doesn't give a definitive answer, and so the responsibility really goes back to us as users, as parents, and as caregivers. If you are like myself, raising young and cute and ever so quickly developing loved ones. And here is where I want to introduce a term to you. I want to introduce the concept of purpose-driven, evidence-informed practice. Okay, purpose-driven, evidence-informed. Am I saying it right? Yes. Purpose-driven, evidence-informed, as opposed to an entirely evidence-driven way of going about life. Now, what I mean by evidence-driven is someone who practices life. I'll give you an example. For example, in parenting, someone who parents solely out of the use of available evidence. Now, if I am of such an attitude, then on the topic of gaming disorder, on the topic of whether it's healthy or not healthy or not ideal to introduce video games to my toddler child, for example, then I don't really have a whole lot to go about to rely on from academic research, because no research is conclusive as to whether it's good and bad and at what age, right? So it's an arbitrary decision that I have to make based on what I see, and if I see that there still has not been research suggesting that a 4-year-old should not be playing video games, well, since it's not saying no, maybe in 50 years time it will say no, but right now there's not a firm, strict, concluded no, and so I'm gonna just let him game. Okay, well, we know that, we know with what understanding how the brain develops in response to stimulation, in response to the environment, their immediate environment. We know that digital activities are not the best, okay, for brain development purposes. But so that's an example of evidence-driven research. In purpose-driven, evidence-informed practice, what comes first is our purpose. How do we want to structure life for ourselves, for our loved ones? How exactly does a tablet computer fit into the purposes, the greater purposes of life? If our purpose is to raise responsible individuals, then we have to look at whether the possession of a tablet computer, the access to a tablet computer with Wi-Fi capabilities, if that falls in line with the development of a sense of responsibility. Okay, we have to ask that question. The purpose comes first, and we can be evidence informed. We can consider evidence available, but we don't let evidence or the lack thereof lead how we make decisions. That's what I mean by that. I'm going to include some of the information in the blurb below. If you want to stay in touch, please like the video, please subscribe to our channel, and until the next video, bye for now.